Welcome to another video on my future series. This time we will be talking about the streetcars, and I hope this doesn't spiral into a two-part video, but we'll see. Remember that I'm getting these ideas from three different sources: my own head, other people's heads, as well as the streetcar concept plan thing, which is quite outdated, but I will link it down in the description. It's from, I think, 2009. As I have said before, I see huge potential for the Portland streetcar to expand and become not only the largest modern streetcar system in the US, which it already is, but also the best. Portland was once a streetcar city, big time, and we're already on a decent start to doing the same again. Here's where I would go from here. Well, let's talk about vehicles and improvements. I would suggest watching my 4-part series where I talked about modern streetcars and how to improve them. But specifically in part 3 of that video, I talked about the 12 elements that I came up with to designing a good modern streetcar network. I would highly suggest giving that a watch first if you haven't yet, as it'll probably, hopefully, make some things make more sense in this video. NS and CL, the North-South line and the Central Loop. These already exist, but I figured I'd mention these because it is a part of the streetcar network. If you can think back to 2015, which was 7 years ago, anyways, you'll remember that there was an NS line and a CL line. In 2015, though, the loop was completed across Tillicum Crossing and it opened, and the CL line is no longer called that, and now it's the A loop and B loop. But really, those are just the same thing, clockwise and counterclockwise. I think that's kind of confusing, and it makes it hard to expand the system having something like that. So I would revert the name back to CL, Central Loop, and then have a CL line clockwise and CL line counterclockwise. I think this would ease a bit of confusion instead of having to remember the A loop travels clockwise, the B loop travels counterclockwise. You're just supposed to remember that as a Portlander taking the streetcar. Not very inviting. Ideally, we would get rid of this line altogether because of how circulatory and loopy it is, but I understand if it stays for a while. MP and BW. MP is Montgomery Park and BW is Broadway. And that's pretty much it. These lines are currently under study as part of the MP2H project, the Montgomery Park to Hollywood corridor that is currently under study. I'll link a page so you can kind of poke around a little bit in the description that talks about this sort of thing. It has to do with extending the streetcar to newly developing areas, similar to the ideas of streetcars from a century ago. The Montgomery Park portion of this study area is being redeveloped. This whole part of Portland is being heavily redeveloped, and it's slowly getting into that. And there was an alignment originally that was going to go up 18th and 19th Avenues to go do that. But I like the more modern version much, much better. It's much simpler, and it comes up 23rd Avenue instead. And the streetcar currently ends at 23rd and Northrop by taking a left onto 23rd. We already have a small amount of track there. This entirely eliminates the use for one-way streets. By having it go up 23rd, you avoid the two-way streets. And then they make a one-way couplet on streets. Why did they do that? In the very end of the alignment, they have it go on one-way. But these are not one-way streets up here. Look on Google Maps. These are two-way streets. We need to be avoiding this one-way garbage. Have the streetcar go down whatever streets you want in both directions. Eliminate the need for confusion. Again, if you watched my video on the 12 elements of designing a good streetcar network, that is one of them. Big time. I would just have it come up 23rd Avenue and down Wilson Street all the way to the Montgomery Park building at Wilson and 27th. And then just end it there. very, very simple, very direct route, and it avoids the one-way nonsense. And the destinations, so if you were to ride an MP streetcar, you could be on an MP streetcar to Montgomery Park or to Convention Center. This streetcar would cross the Broadway Bridge by going through Lovejoy and Northrop areas, over the Broadway Bridge, and on the existing route, but a new turnback would be created on MLK Boulevard. It would come down Lloyd Boulevard and turn trains around there at Grand Avenue. So it would end at Lloyd Boulevard, which is right where the Convention Center station is. The Broadway route is a much, much easier extension. There are already streetcar tracks that briefly go on Broadway and Weidler Streets. This would just be an extension of those tracks, which is already a pretty decent design of tracks, all the way down to the Hollywood Transit Center area, which is also getting the Hollywood Town Center redevelopment. Unfortunately, Broadway and Weidler are both one-way streets, but at 24th Avenue, Weidler comes up and then Broadway becomes a two-way street, and so you can retain the two-way tracks through here, all the way over to the Hollywood Transit Center area. The route would also come down 37th Avenue and then down Halsey to better serve the transit center. This would actually be a fairly busy streetcar corridor through here, this brief stretch of Halsey Street, because you would have Max, blue, green, and red lines, you'd have several bus lines, and 3 streetcar lines if all the lines that I've come up with were to be built. It's a lot. And you would have the newly redeveloped Hollywood Town Center with affordable housing right here. The destinations for this line would be 10th and Clay, right there in Portland at the end of the 10th and 11th Avenue loop, and Hollywood Transit Center. It almost seems like they wanted to include the Montgomery Park line and the Broadway line as the same line. I don't think I would recommend that. I would recommend separating them. That way you have a line to Montgomery Park and you have another line that heads off to Broadway and serves deeper into downtown. SB, Sandy Burnside. At one time I wanted to call it Burnside and Sandy, but I would rather not call the line BS, so we're going to call it SB for Sandy Burnside. This is another route to serve the Hollywood Town Center area. This would provide a much needed connection across the Burnside Bridge, as well as all the way across downtown on Burnside Street. Unfortunately, on the east side, Burnside and Cooch are one-ways, and so you'd have to have the tracks on there. And this portion of the route would actually follow the line 12 exactly. So if you've been on the 12, you've basically already been on this line. But eventually it again hits that same intersection at 37th Avenue and Halsey and goes down to the Hollywood Transit Center. Eventually this line could be extended further on Sandy all the way to the Park Rose Summer Transit Center, if needed. And the destinations for this route would be to Burnside and Kitchener, which is kind of near the Rose Garden area and the Arlington Heights area. It's near that. And Hollywood Transit Center. Alright, so before we talk about the next line, I've got to talk about the Vista Junction. This here would be located at Burnside and Vista Avenue, aka 23rd Avenue. This is a very important and crazy junction because streetcars would be using all of it. Of course, you would want the tracks going straight through Burnside and straight through 23rd Avenue and where it changes over to Vista Avenue. So I would do the junction. I would not build the tracks this wavy, but if we say that this is Burnside, Burns, and this here is the 23rd Avenue tracks, as well as Vista down here, I would also add tracks going this way, and tracks going this way. That way you could get on and off of the junction easily, and streetcars going this way can go up 23rd to get back to the yard, or can get onto Vista Avenue to go toward Council Crest, which I'll talk about momentarily. CC, Council Crest. This is a huge part of Portland's history that I don't think a lot of people know about. I would bring back streetcars to Council Crest. Again, such a huge part of Portland's history. This would be up to date with more modern vehicles, but this would be one of those rare lines where I think having heritage vehicles mixed in would be a great idea. It would attract visitors. I would go back to our old friend Gomako, or however you pronounce that, and make additional replica streetcars of the Council Crest cars for use on this line, and this line only. This would be, again, a lot of people I think would flock to it. And make more than 4 vehicles. We have room. The Type 5 start at number 521, so that means we could start 515 through 520 and get 6 new vehicles that are the heritage vehicles. This would follow the original route as closely as possible down Vista Avenue and Patton Road, Greenway, all the way up to the Council Crest Park area. However, a lot of this has changed over the years, and so you would actually have to end up keeping the tracks on Greenway Avenue and then coming up to the gate of the park and probably ending in a single track there. And then on the way back, it would also do the Ravens View and that crazy alignment coming back toward Portland. It would do that. It would do the original alignment. And there would probably also be an additional northbound track on Vista Avenue, just in case the snowy weather makes climbing those hilly streets by the Ravensview section more difficult. A turnback would also be added at Patton Road so that you could turn streetcars around at Vista and Patton Road, just like you used to be able to more than a century ago. And so the destinations here would be to Council Crest Park or to 23rd and Thurman. And at this portion, I would have the tracks veer off of 23rd Avenue into possibly a single track onto Thurman and just end there. If at some point you wanted to extend that off to Thurman and Gordon, then you could, but I would just say have it end at 23rd and Thurman and have it branch off onto Thurman briefly to turn the streetcar back around. I've had several turn-back ideas for this, how to end the streetcars here. Originally, I wanted it to go all the way down Lovejoy and turn around at 10th and come back down Northrop, but that's just making it use more of the circulator type elements, which I don't think is a good idea. Plus, there are already, if all of these lines were to be built, a lot of lines running on that Northrop and Lovejoy thing. That's too much. So I instead said, okay, well, let's just have it go up 23rd Avenue to 23rd and Thurman. If you can find a better endpoint than that, then comment it down below. I also thought of maybe having it take a right onto Burnside at this junction here and having it end at like Burnside and 5th in a pocket track or something, but I'm not sure. LD, Lloyd Downtown. I suppose maybe Lloyd District, but I think Lloyd Downtown is probably a bit better. So I kind of teased a bit at the end of the Max Future video of, well, what do we do after we hopefully get the Max running, the Max blue and red lines, running off of the street and into a tunnel underneath downtown? Well, now you have available track from Goose Hollow all the way to the Lloyd Center. That just wouldn't be used by anything. Well, streetcars. Already the Max is like a fairly well-designed streetcar throughout downtown. This seems like the solution would fit like a glove. Some new tracks would be built kind of going around the Lloyd Center on 15th, 16th Avenue, as well as going in front of it on Multnomah Street and 13th Avenues before eventually connecting up with the existing Max tracks, and from the Lloyd Center station all the way to Goose Hollow on the blue and red lines. Green lines, I guess, would still be using this portion, but the blue and red line portion from Lloyd Center down to Goose Hollow station would be replaced by this streetcar, LD Lloyd Downtown. Then at Goose Hollow, you could either have the streetcar tracks loop around the circle to turn around, which I think would be cool if you could, but I think more realistically, if you just served the normal existing Goose Hollow platform And remember that the blue and red lines would be running underground at this point. It would be serving a lower level of Goose Hollow. So these would just be probably an escalator ride away from the Max platform. And the Goose Hollow streetcar platform would be the existing one that you can ride through today on the blue and red lines. Then, beyond the Goose Hollow station, you could have it form into a single track, into some sort of tail track, and have the trains park there for a bit and then turn around. That would be how they turn around. So beyond the Goose Hollow station, you wouldn't want to extend this tail track very far, because the tunnel would be right there. The Max would be gradually coming down Jefferson Street and going below the Goose Hollow station, so just be mindful of the trackway here. So the destinations here would be to Goose Hollow Max Station, or to the Lloyd Center, or maybe Lloyd District at 15th and Broadway. Now for MT, Mount Tabor. This would fairly heavily replace the Line 15 route, at least a pretty large chunk of it, which runs through Belmont and Morrison Streets. There was a streetcar line here 100 years ago that served this area pretty well, and I would like to see it return. I would like for it to use the Morrison Bridge, but I'll settle for using the Burnside or Hawthorne Bridge if that makes things easier. It seems like the Morrison Bridge closes every couple of years for repairs, so I don't know if this is exactly the best option. So that's why I say Burnside or Hawthorne, which will both have other streetcar lines on them. My video light died. Well, anyways, I personally would have this streetcar go over the Hawthorne Bridge, because I think that's the easiest way to then have it come up First Avenue and then down Yamhill Morrison Streets down to the Goose Hollow Max Station. It would make it easiest to use the old Max tracks after, again, hopefully the blue and red line Max gets submerged underground. So that would mean that the route would go down Morrison and Belmont. They're two one-ways for quite a while, until 25th Avenue, where Belmont becomes a two-way. And then it just kind of stays on Belmont. It would come down 69th Avenue briefly before ending at the Mount Tabor Park entrance area from that side. Very similar to the Line 15 route that we see today. Now, that would mean that the destinations would be to Goose Hollow Max Station or to Mount Tabor Park at 69th Avenue. There's another line here that I'm going to talk about in a second that goes on Hawthorne Boulevard, but the Mount Tabor line would split from Hawthorne Boulevard on 11th and 12th Avenues, which are, again, unfortunately, one-ways, and it would connect with the Morrison-Belmont Street alignment. So that's how that connects. HA, Hawthorne. This, pretty much self-explanatory, goes over the Hawthorne Bridge. Again, same routing on Yamhill and Morrison Streets down to Goose Hollow. Those are the three lines that I would have doing that. And comes down first, goes over the Hawthorne Bridge, and stays on Hawthorne Boulevard all the way until 50th Avenue, where Hawthorne kind of turns into 50th Avenue. And then it would just end at around the 50th and Division Street area. So the destinations here would be Goose Hollow Max Station and 50th and Division. P.O. Powell Boulevard. This is a pretty important one. Powell definitely needs some sort of high-capacity transit option. I think a max down Powell Boulevard or under Powell Boulevard is a bit overkill. I don't think it would have that high of ridership, but I do think it needs something, and I don't know if BRT is enough. And Division, which in some areas is literally short walking distance away from Powell, that already has BRT service, or it will, this September. So, yeah, kind of a little bit interesting there. So, I think a streetcar would be perfect here. My drawings and maps have it end at around the 92nd Avenue area, but you could have it extend as far as, say, 122nd if you wanted. But for the sake of my maps here and what I'll show you, I'm having it end at 92nd. And this is simply because it would connect with the Max Green line that way. The route here would start in downtown Portland and use the existing streetcar alignment on 10th and 11th Avenue. That's where I'd have it turn around, is to go from 10th over to 11th Avenue. And it would use the existing streetcar route over Tillicum Crossing, and eventually, once you get to the other side of Tillicum Crossing, I would have this go on the Max Orange Line tracks and serve the Orange Line station at OMSI and the Orange Line station at Clinton Southeast 12th. And then it would break off from there, and you would unfortunately have to figure out how to build this. This would be a bit difficult. But you would have the tracks break off from there, possibly swing under the rail bridge there, and go onto Powell Boulevard, where you would head off to 92nd. That would be the biggest design challenge, though, is how to get the tracks off of Powell, because there's a freight track right next to the Orange Line track. You can't just have it veer over there and then go down to Powell. You almost have to veer the other way and have it come around and under like that, which is not exactly easy, but that's how I would do it. So your destinations would be to 10th and Northrop, or to Powell and 92nd, or 99th, 104th, 112th, 122nd, whatever you want to do. CE, Cesar Chavez Boulevard. This is the third and final route to serve the Hollywood Town Center development area. It's also a very important and much needed north-south connection on the east side. It's also a very important north-south connection on the east side, instead of being close to downtown. It's not close to downtown at all. And it runs on Cesar Chavez Boulevard all the way until Powell Boulevard, where you would have a junction. You could go left or right onto Powell, but I think what would make sense is to have it take a left onto Powell and have it continue all the way down to Powell and 92nd, or wherever, like where the Powell streetcar would end. And at Coe Circle, you would put the tracks around Coe Circle. I believe the circle is big enough to be able to easily put streetcar tracks around it, and it wouldn't interfere with minimum turning radius and requirements of that sort. So I think you'd be fine there. And the tracks through that portion would be embedded in red brick. The reason is because 100 years ago or so, there were tracks going through Coe Circle, although it was actually on Gleason Street, not Cesar Chavez Boulevard, and the tracks were embedded in a nice red brick. So I would bring that back to say, hey, this used to be this way. So the destinations for this would be to Hollywood Transit Center, or to Powell and 92nd, 99th, whatever your end destination. Again, I would do Powell and 92nd to connect with Max Green Line, at a minimum. I swear I'm not talking about cars here, but VW and GM, these are more or less extras, but I would say if you can build both, do it. Although really I'd only pick these if North Portland really needed that extra development. VW is not Volkswagen, it is Vancouver Williams Avenues. Pretty much self-explanatory. And GM is Grand MLK. The Vancouver Williams streetcars would start at Rose Quarter Transit Center on Wheeler Avenue and come up that way until it does the Vancouver and Williams Avenues portion, and it would go all the way to Killingsworth Street. So the destinations here would be to Rose Quarter or to Killingsworth Street. The Grand and MLK route would be an extension of the already existing line there, but it would continue all the way up as well to Killingsworth Street, and it would go down Killingsworth until 33rd. And then down at OMSI, I would build some sort of auxiliary track there at the OMSI platform to be able to park a streetcar there to turn it around. And so your destinations would be to OMSI or to Killingsworth and 33rd. BT, Bridge Transfer, yet another streetcar line that existed a long time ago, and it's very simple. It literally just connects the bridges on the east side. And that's it. This would be a free shuttle ride that would begin at the Rose Quarter Special Events track, the pocket track there at Rose Quarter Transit Center. It would begin there, and then it would break away from the Max track, so it would serve it and go through kind of the convention center area. And it would just come down MLK and Grand Avenues, only stopping at the bridges. This route would be free because it's a shuttle more so, and it only serves stops at the bridges, like I say, before ending at OMSI. Again, at that auxiliary siding track thing that you could build at OMSI. So the destinations here would be to Rose Quarter Transit Center or to OMSI. Lake Oswego. In that 2009 streetcar concept plan thing that, again, I have linked in the description, that was a strong consideration. They were going to build the streetcar extension out to Lake Oswego. And this extension just doesn't feel right to me. Some things just don't really make sense. Where they wanted it to end was at a shopping area, and they were going to build a large parking garage. And I don't know, to me it kind of just sounded like this could have been a Max extension. They were expecting high capacity and stuff like that, and yet they're just going to use these little 66-foot streetcars? I don't know. Again, for all of these, part of my 12 elements that I have in my How to Design a Good Streetcar series was getting longer vehicles, ones that are useful. Something about the Lake Oswego project just doesn't feel right to me. I would just keep it as a bus line, maybe not even a BRT line. I don't know. Let me know what you think about the Lake Oswego extension, but it just never has sat well with me. It just doesn't feel right. Now, I made a map way back in October 2021 that showed my ideas at the time, in October 2021. It's changed a lot since then, my ideas, but this map does have some similarities with what I've proposed here. Hopefully I'll remember and figure out how to put this in the video description so you'll see the October 2021 map that I made on Google's My Map feature. I also painstakingly made maps for each of these lines back in April 2022 when I was originally planning on doing this video, and again, my ideas have changed a bit since then too. My ideas are always evolving. And finally, I've gone back to the My Maps thing and made this most up-to-date version as of summer 2022 that shows everything, including the yard locations. You see the blue pinpoints? Those are where I would build train yards, if at all possible. And the green pinpoint is the one where the currently active yard is, under I-405. I also have some non-revenue tracks, of which I also show on that map. Here are additional tracks that would rarely get used, but they're there in case you need to divert streetcars onto different routes because of bridge lifts, or maintenance, or construction, switch issues, a water main burst, whatever the issue may be. Now, I mentioned it already when I talked about Council Crest, but Vista Avenue would have tracks in both directions throughout the whole thing, even though there's a portion that goes on Ravensview for trips heading back toward Portland. The reason is because oftentimes they'll detour buses this way, and it'll say buses will travel on Vista Avenue in both directions, no service to Ravensview. During some extreme snow events, this just makes it easier because the Ravensview portion is very hilly and windy and could cause issues. I also mentioned this, but again, having a turnoff at Vista and Patton Road to make it so that streetcars can turn around there. That way, not every streetcar would be going to Council Crest Park, or in case some other, again, scheduled maintenance, or they're turning it around because of bad weather, or whatever reason you may need to turn them around at Vista and Patton Road, I would bring that back too. On 11th and 12th Avenues, there would also be sections of track connecting it. If you do like what I said with the Mount Tabor line, how you could have it go over Burnside Bridge, Morrison Bridge, or Hawthorne Bridge, if you do the alignment that I chose, which was to have it go over the Hawthorne Bridge, there's already going to be streetcar tracks on 11th and 12th so that it gets up to Morrison and Belmont area. But I would extend these tracks further up 11th and 12th to connect with Burnside Street. That way, if you needed to reroute streetcars, you easily could. This portion on 11th and 12th would have no stops. At Coe Circle, I would have it to where you could make a circle. The tracks would go in a complete circle in case you wanted to turn streetcars around at either end of it. You easily could by just simply looping around the circle. If you were to build both the VW line and GM lines to go up Vancouver, Williams Avenues and all that, there would be a stretch connecting both of those lines on Killingsworth Street, again with no stops. So it would connect from the Vancouver Williams Avenue side, 2 tracks on Killingsworth, no stops at all, until the Killingsworth portion of the Grand and Martin Luther King line. There are undoubtedly other non-revenue tracks that you could build as well to just make things easier. So what do you build in what order? Well, this is how I would do it. The NS line and CL line are already operational. And then Montgomery Park and Broadway lines are already under study, but from this point on, this is what I would build. The Grand and MLK and Vancouver Williams Avenue thing, I would think those would definitely be placed on the back burner, and probably bridge transfer as well. Then, after the max is hopefully off of Yamhill and Morrison Streets and whatever at this point, and once the subway tunnel is built, and, you know, those tracks are empty, then these 3 lines would be the last ones to be built. And there you go. That is everything. That is all the stuff I wanted to talk about in this video. As you see, again, I think the Portland streetcar has a very bright future. So I will link this map down below, the summer 2022 version of the map. And I thank you for watching, and now I've got to charge my video light and do a lot of editing. But thank you for watching this video.